This lecture is going to focus on summary writing. For the past few weeks, you have been writing short summaries to go along with your Cornell notes, but now we're going to be bringing our summaries to a different level and writing a little bit more complete and an academic summary. So, the first thing that you want to start with when you are writing this type of summary is an introduction. In your introduction, you want to give a one sentence statement that contains the main point of the text. So this sentence is going to include the author and title of the source, and then some background about the author can also be included. As far as the background piece, I like to include maybe the publication that they wrote for, or maybe the year that they wrote it. For an example, I used a piece that we've read already for this course. So here is what an introduction would look like if we were writing a summary for that piece. I'm probably going to butcher this name, but let's say Sadia Faruqi, an interfaith activist, recently wrote an article for the Texas Observer entitled Cut from the Same Cloth. This article focuses on Faruqi's experience with wearing a hijab and how this helped shape her identity. So you see in that example that I mentioned the author's name. I talk about her position, the publication name, the Texas Observer, and the title of the article. And then I also give a sentence that explains what the overall main idea of this piece is. So it is about wearing a hijab and how that is shaping her identity. So that's step one. The second part is you're going to create the body of your summary. So, whereas your summaries for your Cornell notes have been 2 to 3 sentences long for most of you, the body of this type of summary should be at least 1 paragraph long, but it could be more depending on the length of what you're reading. The rule of thumb is that your summary length should be at least 1/3 of what you read. So if you read something that's a page long, your summary should be 1/3 of that. If you read something that's 3 pages long, your summary should be 1 page. So a summary is shorter, but the length depends on how long whatever it is you're reading is. You want to identify only the main ideas and the key points of the original text. You do not want to include any supporting details here. You just want to focus on the key ideas and key points that the author is making. Here's the biggest thing where students always lose points. Do not include your opinion. So the word I should not be mentioned at all in your summary. You should only be focusing on the things the author is saying. Do not include quotes from the text. In a summary, everything should be written in your own words. And then lastly, we're going to document using MLA. We're not going to go full MLA format. You can try that if you'd like. That's totally up to you. But for the summary, we're just going to put the author's last name in parentheses at the end of the summary. You'll notice in the sample that I'm about to get to, I also include the date of the article. Some other things to keep in mind. When you're writing a summary, you want to use present tense. So instead of saying the author wrote about, use words like the author writes about, the author discusses, the author is telling us. We don't want anything in the past tense. Reference the author according to the author's name. So typically we refer to authors by their last name, and avoid writing in first or second pronouns. So what I don't want to see is a bunch of he said this, he did this, he mentioned this. You're going to be kind of switching back and forth with using the author's last name and using those pronouns like he or she. You'll see this example in the sample that is coming up. So here's a sample that I, again, created from the piece that we read earlier this semester. I am going to read it out loud for you. I know that you can all read this too, but just for the sake of this lecture, I'm going to read it out loud. In this piece, Faruqi describes an awkward experience at Subway when the cashier asked her about wearing a hijab. Instead of answering truthfully, Faruqi gives a vague answer. As she reflects on this conversation, she thinks about the significance of the hijab and how it has become a symbol of division. Faruqi also shares her experiences prior to wearing a hijab and explains when she began wearing one. She discusses how her identity has changed since she began wearing one. Faruqi concludes this essay by developing an answer to the question originally posed at Subway. She explains that she wears a hijab as an expression of who she is and who she aspires to be. So that is an excellently written summary. I do notice that there's one error in that summary. Make sure when you are doing your summaries that you're checking for grammar and you're checking for punctuation, and making sure that everything sounds and flows accurately. Ultimately, as we practice these, that is something that you're going to be graded on. Lastly, you can see I put the two pieces together. So I put the introduction together with the body, and you can just see how it flows. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'll just read a portion. Sadia Faruqi, an interfaith activist, recently wrote an article from the Texas Observer entitled Cut from the Same Cloth. This article focuses on Faruqi's experience with wearing a hijab and how this helped shape her identity. In this piece, Faruqi describes, and it goes on. So this is an appropriate summary for that piece. As we move on to writing summaries, I'm expecting your summaries to now look something similar to this one in order to get full credit for the upcoming assignments. Lastly, use your annotations in Cornell Notes to help you. The whole reason that we're doing annotating and the whole reason we're taking Cornell Notes is so that you will remember what you read and that you will be able to do assignments like completing summaries. So make sure that you are using those tools to help you as we start writing our summaries. Again, email me with any questions that you might have.